Welcome to the Faithful Informed podcast, where we will be having honest conversations around parenting and personal growth. This is a faith-based podcast, and we are excited to have you join us. My hope is that this podcast will provide you a safe space to grow and learn to become the best version of yourself. Ultimately, my goal is for us to be equipped with great parenting skills and to grow to become our best versions. Today's guest is Colleen. Colleen has a master's in clinical psychology and uses her degree to help with her organization's leadership and development. She is happily married with two amazing children. And today we will discuss the power of choices versus the power struggle and how the power of choices fosters safety and models God as our Father accurately. We're excited to have you join us today. So my first question for you is, how do power struggles happen between parents and children, and what is really going on in the child's brain during those moments?
Yeah, so kind of like what you mentioned before, Marion, where it really is a tug of war to gain control. The difference between a parent and a child and what's going on is a parent feels they have the authority and ultimate control of any situation involving their child, and they should be the ones in that control seat. However, with a child who still has a brain that's developing, that prefrontal cortex that's responsible for impulse control and deductive reasoning, that is still in development. And so when a child feels controlled by another person, the amygdala, which is responsible for that fight or flight response, actually activates. It's a stress response to feeling controlled. And so then, as you can imagine with most of our kids and us, a fight or flight response looks like I'm going to cry or say no and avoid, or I'm going to fight back and scream and kick. And that further enacts in a parent the ability to keep maintaining control as a sense of this is my child and I should have control of the situation. And so it just keeps kind of going back and forth. And so it turns into this clash when really a child has a developmental need. It's not about the specific issue at hand. It's about them exhibiting autonomy and regaining control over themselves as they develop.
For sure. And one thing I'm thinking of right now is it looks different. Well, it can look different in small children than it does in adolescents, where an adolescent will have more, let's say, a power struggles possibly over a phone. Let's say I try to take my child's phone away because she's been on it for a prolonged period of time. She may be reluctant to give me the phone because she's like, I can handle this. I can be on my phone for hours. It's not going to be a problem. And the feeling of, that she's going to be missing out on the entire world. She may be reluctant to give me the phone. But after explaining and saying, hey, it's not that I just want to have control. I just want you to take a little bit of a break because it's important to regulate your brain and to be bored a little bit. And so I shouldn't say a little bit, a lot. It's important for them to be bored versus in a small child, something, let's say I take the Nintendo Switch away, or I say you can't go outside until your room is clean, then that might become a meltdown. More, why do you have to, why is this happening? And then it's easy just to talk through the situation to help them regulate their brain, so they can logically think through it and say, oh, well, I'm going to get this back, or I can go outside as soon as I'm done cleaning my room, and maybe mom will help me clean my room. Do you have any examples of that?
Yeah, and I think my kids obviously are 7 and 10, so they're not in that, early teen age yet. But I think as kids get older, it becomes an important thing for a parent to explain more about the why it's important for these choices and what those implications are versus when the child is younger. And again, brain development is still happening to just kind of explain the how or what. So I think for us, I have lots of examples because I am not immune to power struggles with my kids. So there are several of those. And I used to, one of the ones that I remember vividly kind of getting into it with Brooklyn over was kind of what to wear. Like, hey, I set out your clothes for you and they're all ready. And then the next day she would put them on and something would happen. I don't like this color anymore. These pants don't fit me well. I don't like this. And I would say, well, what's wrong with it? It looks great. Like, we need to go. We already had it planned out. This is what you're wearing. I don't want to wear this. And fine, what about this? I don't like that either. And I'm getting frustrated and going, oh my gosh, then just pick something. And then she's upset because she's going, well, I wanted you to help me. And I'm going, well, I can't help you. You don't like anything I'm wearing. And it just kind of goes back and forth. And I realized that in getting her input ahead of time, it's really important to say, hey, I'd gladly help you pick something. I don't have to pick it, but I can help you. What are you feeling like wearing? Here's the weather. Let's check that. Okay, this is what the weather is. Would you like to wear shorts? Do you feel like wearing a dress? You want to wear pants? Do you want to layer up in case it gets hot and then you can take that off? Kind of letting her guide that decision. And then with Logan after school, it's always no iPads, no electronics. You've got to get your homework done. And he's had a very stressful long day at school, feeling like he's been doing work all day already. And now he comes home to a new boss demanding more work of him when he really just wants to decompress from the day. So, yeah, there's a couple of examples of power struggles that I've gotten into with both of my children in terms of just choices and what they're feeling. And we'll get into it a little bit later, but obviously, power of choice really helps out in those situations.
100%. So, as we know with adolescents, the one of the really important things to do with them is to mitigate arguments. And honestly, I feel that is so essential for little kids too. Um, in adolescence, though, because they have this, I'm going to break off from you and become independent, these power of choices are very important to give them a sense of power. So, for example, what I do with my kid, well, Henry, for example, who doesn't like to wear collared shirts, but when we go to church, I'm like, okay, you can't wear that, like a red top and like, neon shorts. I'm like, please, pick out a shirt, a collared shirt. And so then what I usually do is I say, here's one, here's the other one. And here's one more. Which one do you want? You can pick one of these. I don't care which one you wear as long as you pick one. And that usually helps because then it gives him control to say, this is the one I want. And with my oldest daughter, here's something that I do is I don't allow my kids to have electronics in their rooms at night. And so before, oh my gosh. So my oldest can be a little messy. I shouldn't say a little messy. She's messy. Let's just get it out there. She's messy. And so I tell her, you can get your phone in the morning after you have gotten yourself dressed, brushed your teeth, and you have put on your clothes, and you can come and get your phone. However, if you're not dressed and you don't have your teeth brushed and you do not have your room cleaned, you will not have time to get your phone because then we have to leave because those things need to be done first. And so I always tell her, the choice is yours. You can either get up in time, get everything done, grab your phone, or tootle in the morning and then not have time to grab your phone. But that's kind of like one of those things where you give choices to give them power back. And, but at the same time, you're still getting the result you want.
Yeah, and to tag on to that, I think the important part or the key for any parent is to give choices that you're okay with either one if they pick. And so my mom used to do this when I was younger. She wouldn't say, do you want to have vegetables with dinner? Which would give me a choice. And then I say no. And now she's coming back at me saying, well, that's not an option. Well, then don't give me that option. So she would instead say, would you like peas for dinner or did you want green beans? And then, even though maybe I didn't want either, but at least I would go, well, I'm kind of feeling peas more than green beans at this point, or do you want to brush your teeth first, or do you want to put your pajamas on first? Either one we can do in any order. We still have the goal of going to bed. And each of these actions you're doing are still going to fulfill what you as a parent would like. However, you're giving them, like you said, a little bit more freedom and autonomy within that.
So then, Colleen, what fears make parents hold tighter control instead of offering choices, and how can they work through those fears? Do you have any that come to mind?
Yeah. So I think the fear, number one, is again, just a loss of control. The fear is that, you're going to maybe raise a child that does whatever they want, becomes defiant, resists rules or parameters or really just you ultimately losing control over your household or the things you want. You know, when you set things forward for your children, you think, hey, I'm doing this out of love, out of care, to create safety. There's reasons. However, kids are not in our heads all the time. I'm sure you've seen the movie Inside Out. And so they do not understand what's happening in our heads. Similarly, we don't understand what's happening in theirs. And so I think that the fear really is losing control over your child in the situation, which could then frustrate you and make you lose control of your emotions and possibly even your reactions in those moments. And there's a lot of pressure as well from the outside on how to be a good parent. And you hear kids screaming, and there's automatic judgment. Oh, that parent must be not doing the right thing. Or, even though we've all been there. And so I think something to alleviate some of that stress and worry and fear around needing that control is that you're going to gain more control of the situation by giving your kids options and choices and letting them feel autonomous, but still operating within the boundaries that you set. So it's no surprise I work in an indoor soccer company. And one of the things that we kind of talk about is to set the out of bounds lines on a field, like a soccer field. So kids understand on a court, on a field, there's out of bounds, and they know you can't go out of bounds, but you can operate pretty independently however you want within the bounds of the field. And so setting up that structure for kids the same way, these are the out of bounds lines, but within that, you can operate however you'd like. So out of bounds is where we're having vegetables for dinner. That's not an option. You're out of bounds if you don't. But hey, what kind of vegetables would you like? Would you like to try something new? Do you want to help me cook that? What can we add to it to make it taste better? Should we try some garlic or some flavoring or seasoning that you might like? Do you want to grow the vegetables in a garden where we can pick them and we can see the fruits of our labor end up on our plate? A lot of different things that you can do.
Well, and that reminds me of last episode. Remember when we talked about positive intent? And I think once we understand why our children are doing what they're doing, we know that they're not doing it to be malicious or combative, but more because um, they're either, they have their desires. And so, again, they're doing it because maybe they can't connect their brain at the time, or maybe they are trying to break off and become independent, or maybe they just don't see why they should be giving up what they're giving up or change or eating vegetables. And so, understanding that I think is really important. And I think, you know, that's something I really had to learn because I grew up in a drill sergeant home. I mean, I had no voice in my home. I wasn't allowed to make any choices. Um, well, I shouldn't say that. I was able to make some choices, but I didn't have any say so or input. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does.
So once in a while, I'd have a choice, but for the most part, it was like you're going to sit down, you're going to eat what's on the table, you're going to
Mhm.
do what I tell you to, and if not, you're going to get down and give me 25 push-ups because my dad was also in the
Bet you
army.
were strong, Marion. To something important really with kids, and I started to try and work on this with Logan, especially as I started giving him more freedom. But it's letting them know that freedom isn't given; it's earned. And so, as you start to give them a little bit more freedom, let them make some choices. It's, hey, I'm going to let you take your bike to the bike jumps with your friend. However, how am I going to be able to get a hold of you and know that you're okay? How are you going to be able to get a hold of me in a time of need? Okay, well, let's talk that out. And I think as kids get older and older, like you kind of said, they understand the more complex reasoning a little bit better and they can work with you on solutions.
100%. I agree with you. Okay, so let me ask you another question. How can parents maintain authority without becoming authoritarian?
Authoritarian.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah. So again, kind of like I had mentioned before, if you set choices up that fall within the realm of acceptability with yourself, then you can still have done what you would like to have done without becoming a dictator and demanding that your child do these things. Again, as kids feel controlled, they feel the need to, their stress hormones are up and they feel the need to fight back. And so rather than present something to them that is an absolute rule that they have to follow, presenting it as, hey, we really need to make sure that we're going to bed at a decent hour so that our brains can reset and we can retain all that wonderful information we learned in the day. And so that we're well rested for tomorrow. We have the energy to do what we need to do tomorrow. So, how can we do that? What's a good bedtime? And I just did this with my kids the other day. What's a good bedtime? We kind of talked about that first. Oh, I think 9. Ooh, okay, 9. Well, let's work backwards. That gives us this much sleep. Is that going to be good? Well, yeah, it can take us a little bit longer. Let's try 8:30. Yeah, 8:30 sounds good. Okay, cool. So if we need to get to bed at 8:30 and you guys get off at school at 4 and we have extracurriculars in between, when is a good time to do homework? Well, I think we should do homework an hour before bed. Okay, how long does it normally take for you to do your homework? An hour. Okay, then is that giving us enough time to brush our teeth and get in our jammies and do story time as well? So, kind of like walking them through mapping out their choices can also really help set them up for success and give you the comfort that you need as a parent to not turn into a dictator, but really have them get their input. Kind of like you said, you didn't have input. I know it's not a democracy, they don't get to vote on bedtime, but having their input also gets their buy in.
Well, because then what you're saying to them is we're a team, we're in this together. And
Mm-hmm.
dictator parents actually produce at risk children. And at risk children are combative and they're rebellious. And so that's what we want to avoid. And so we want to make sure that our relationships are safe, that we're building trust with our children, and that we're giving them options, and that we are showing them that we're a team and not just wanting to control them. So then the next question would be is how can offering choices be an act of humility, discipleship, and modeling Christ-like leadership?
Yeah. So I think that, again, offering choices, it really taps into humility because you're saying, I don't have all the answers. And I am not the ultimate ruler over you, my child, and what you do and your every behavior. I'm not in your body or in your mind 24/7. So I'm humbled enough to say, as you said, let's do this together. Let's talk about these things. What are the choices that we have? And why are those choices important for our ultimate goal? And I think that we see that in the Bible and with Jesus, when he went across the lands and mentored people and did his preachings and his teachings, he did it from a place of humility. It wasn't a forced compliance. He didn't coerce people and demand that they follow him. He did it from a humble space. And I think that God does that with us as his children with free will. We have free will to make our choices in life, and those choices ultimately have rewards or consequences. And we take those as we make those choices. And I think the beauty of free will is that we were given that. We were given the choice to follow him or not follow him. And we get to see what lies on the other side of those choices. And we understand fully what those are. So presenting that to our kids as well and trying to guide them and bring them up in an environment that teaches them the same teachings that we've learned from God and from the Bible is exactly what I think the plan should be.
So what this makes me think of is um, we know that modeling has the biggest impact on children. And so when I think about representing God and representing the Lord, um, our children see God the way they see us because they look at God the Father as their father, and what we model to them is a representation of God. So if we're dictators, they're going to view God as being a dictator. If we're compassionate, loving, and kind, then that is going to allow them to see God in that way. And so it is really important that we represent God correctly so that our children will have the right image of the Lord and not be afraid to go to him, but to be able to have that safe relationship that they have with us and to ask God and talk to him about the things that even you and I are talking about, because he talks to us and he wants to have a relationship with us. And so modeling that is, as you said, just so essential to their relationship with him.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree
Okay.
more.
Yeah. Okay. So then let me see. I have one more. What does it do to a child's identity when they are constantly given opportunities to make choices, use their voice, and be responsible?
Yeah, so one of the things that happens as kids go from being infants to moving along, the growth chain is in the beginning, they're completely dependent on us as parents. We need to change them, feed them, burp them, entertain them, all of the things, nurture them, console them. And as they start to get older and develop some of that independence, and as they start to, say, go to school, their sphere of influence widens and they start to get more and more outputs from other people around who are they? What do they like? What do they not like? What's their identity? And identity is a huge, huge beast to tackle as an adolescent. But again, and that's why you have that identity versus role confusion, one of Erickson's psychosocial stages of development. But again, what it helps them do when you give them choices is to operate and navigate in a very safe space for exploration of who they are, to really find that true meaning versus feeling guilt and shame about who they are or who they think they are or who they'd like to be because other people are controlling those choices and telling them who they should be. They're saying, ooh, don't wear that. Oh, don't talk like that. Oh, don't choose that. And kids start getting confused and start to worry about, well, who am I going to grow up to be? And what if my parents are disappointed? I know so many friends who have said, yeah, I think my parents are disappointed in the vocation I chose or in the job I chose. I think they wanted me to be this, or I think they wanted me to be this, or my parents are ashamed of who I, am in a relationship with, or my parents are ashamed of what I'm wearing or how I want to look. And so I think it's really important to give them that safe space to make those choices, present choices to them, and also let them know what those, again, sometimes repercussions or consequences that they're not thinking about might be if they do choose one path or another. Our job's to guide them at that point.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it stirs up safe relationships. Number two, it helps children to think through who they really are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to make sure that your kids know as you start to give them more and more autonomy and freedom, it doesn't mean that you are abandoning them and leaving them on their own. It means that you are allowing them to make choices, be responsible for those choices, but you're still there to guide and support them. And so one of the things I tell my son, if he had joined piano lessons and then he wanted to stop and he wanted to join, he wanted to stop. And so he and I talked about, I am okay with you stopping if you've fulfilled your commitment that your teacher expected. So find out how much notice she needs for you to quit lessons if that's what you've decided. And B, if you've decided this, you're going to tell her that you've quit lessons and why, not me. And then if she wants to talk to me about that, I will absolutely support you and back you up 100%. But if I tell her Logan wants to quit piano, and then the next day he sees her and says, no, I want to do piano, because as we know with kids, their minds change all the time, every day. And so it lets them own that choice, but I didn't leave him on his own with the response of the piano teacher. I was there to back him up if there was any kind of question on, are you sure Logan doesn't want to play? Yeah, he's made up his mind. He's done playing for now. And so it's important to recognize that as kids make those choices, you're still there to help them, not rescue them, but help and guide them, back them up, and support them when they need.
I love that though, because it's so important to hold kids responsible for their choices. And so you wanted to do this, I paid for this. And so it's your
Mm-hmm.
responsibility to carry that out. But you do have the choice after the season to not continue. Thank you for joining us today in the Faithful Informed Parenting Podcast. We look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks for a new conversation.